in the future, if all of the routine work is done by AI, where are the managers going to come from? Because they're not going to be the ones who have the learning. They're not going to be the ones who got things wrong or got challenged by a customer or whatever, because all that was done for them. So I think we need to rethink apprenticeship, and we need to be very deliberate in terms of how we're going to train people in the future.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode in our Real Talk series. I'm your host, William Delaney. I'm the marketing lead here at Allex, and together we're generating a podcast/live series where we bring people from industry, tech, and community together to see how AI is impacting them on the day-to-day. So today we're going to be joined by digital transformation expert Tony Moroney. But before I hand you over to Tony, I want to give you some ground rules. So the first thing is we will have ample time for questions. So please feel free to put them in the chat, along with maybe where you're calling in from. We would love to see it and your feedback. And we'll get to it towards the end of the session. Along with that, with Allex, we do have a 20% discount today for those who register. If feel free to click on the QR code, which you will see towards the end of the session and throughout. But without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Tony for him to give you a quick introduction before we hop into your questions.
Well, William, thank you for inviting me on the podcast. Delighted to be with you. For those who don't know me, I'm Tony Moroney. I'm based in Dublin, Ireland, but I work all around the world. I go by the tag the Digital Explorer because essentially all of my work is around digital disruption. And I also work with my brother in the States. We have a business called Access CX where we look at CX transformation. So delighted to be here with you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining. Firstly, it's great to have a fellow Irishman on board, particularly because you told me the other day that you were from Kilkenny, which is very close to where I grew up, Carlow. So it's nice to have a fellow countryman, even though you are based in Dublin.
Yes,
But
indeed.
without further Yeah, exactly. Without further ado, I'm going to jump into the questions because we do have a lot. Some came from our guests and some came from, our audience, not guests, and some came from research. So without further ado, we're going to start with the actual title of this podcast because one of the things that people really wanted to know was, is, for example, AI generating a more innovative/smarter generation, or is it generating an unemployable one? And what do you think about that?
Well, look, neither is inevitable. AI is not going to make people necessarily more smart. It's not necessarily going to make them
Hmm.
unemployable either. But it does come down to how we use AI. And we need to think about, are we using AI to enhance the capability of our people? Or are we going to see AI become a shortcut to experience? Because, AI can do wonderful things, as you know. And if we're not thinking about the work, we're not thinking about the answers, we're just producing, rote answers. Where are we going to develop our judgment? Where are we going to develop our experience or the confidence in terms of even what we're talking about? So I don't think it's either or. I do think it's a two-way street. So I think there's an obligation on organizations to think about the future of work and how they're going to develop their employees. But I think we all have a personal responsibility. Just like we use Google Maps, we don't know how to get to places without Google Maps necessarily anymore. We run the same risk in work. So we need to be thinking about, okay, well, we are in a world where AI is going to be there. And that means our skills need to change. And one of the biggest things that I've seen in the last decade or so is that, one of the issues with digital transformation is not the digital technologies, it's that our skill set becomes redundant. So we need to be thinking about, ourselves and investing in ourselves. So it's about us being smarter in terms of how we use AI and making sure that, it is a tool that supports and augments us as opposed to a crutch that we rely on without too much thinking.
Interesting. That kind of brings me into the next question because you kind of hit on it a little bit in this, so good leeway. You said before previously that the real risk is not simply job loss, but capability loss. And can you
Hmm.
expand a little bit on what you meant by that?
Yeah, and I did a talk in India recently at a law school, and I was explaining to them that look, in the good old days, a would be lawyer would go to college to study law, they'd join the
Mhm.
firm, and in the first year or two, well, what were they? They were the apprentice, so they were doing the file notes, doing the reviews, going through the documents, preparing whatnot. If that's all gone, and you now walk into the law firm and that's all done by AI, right? Where is your capability going to come from? Because actually, you've never done this before. In fact, even if it's done for you, you won't know, well, is this a good thing, a bad thing? Is this something that seems right? Because I have no idea. I don't have the experience. And if you think of your own career, when you're young and starting out, you joined and you
Hmm.
learned from being there. You didn't know the answers, so you asked questions. You produced the first output, and someone took you aside and said, "Look, William, that's you're missing quite a few things here. You need to think about X, Y, Z. Z is wrong. We don't do Z because it's inconsistent with our values or whatever it might be." But over a period of time, you were developing these capabilities, and your expertise grew, and your confidence grew, and your ability to add value and do things that created good outcomes for your customers also grew. So I think the real issue is that people stop learning, and it does reframe how we need to think about work, because it's not necessarily about the outcome. It's about the outcome is important, but it's the learning to get the outcome. And I think we need to step back and sort of say, well, if we're going to take away a lot of the mundane, which is a good thing, how are we going to make sure, though, that we're not taking away the ability to develop the capability of our people? Because if we do that,
Hmm.
you'll have seen phrases about hollowing out the organization. Well, does that mean there'll be a few people at the top who have 30 years experience, and they have judgment because they've been there, and then you have a load of people who actually joined and AI does all the work, and they actually don't really understand what the organization is about or what the market is about or what customers really want. All they know how to do is get answers out of AI. But sure, every firm can do that. So I think it's around how we're going to develop capabilities of our people and how AI is going to support them, because it can't just be about having AI, because AI is going to be table stakes. Everyone will have AI. It's a question
Yeah.
of what are you going to do with AI that's going to build capability and make sure that you are continuing to build capability in your firm.
Yeah, I guess that's like if you're standing in front of an audience and suddenly you lose your clothes. It's the same concept because at the end of the day, if you don't know what's happening, you can't really be able to take on the task yourself. I think that's a fear with AI in general is that let's just say the computer system is down. Can you manually do it?
Yeah.
And I think that that's going on with capabilities. It's a big thing in marketing, right? In my world, because you see a lot with junior staff that they rely heavily on AI, especially in content writing, for example.
Mm,
The natural gift of writing is beginning to die out. You see this with the a dash on every single post online these days. So
yeah.
yeah, so I
And
guess
if
I
you
can see
think
where you're
about that,
coming from.
in the past, what would happen is someone would take a couple of hours to come back with their first draft, and someone that they reported in to say, "Look, yeah, it's a good first effort, but you need to go away and rethink about the following things." And the red pen came out, and in that moment, there was incredible learning. Now, compare that to, well, I'll just put a prompt into an AI and it produces the beautiful, immaculate, word perfect document for me. What have I learned
Yeah.
besides writing a prompt?
Yeah, and I guess also from the terms like when I think about Alex and resource management, right, just in my head, like one of the things that are really important these days is specialities within resource management because they're becoming few and far between and more relied on because people are utilizing AI rather than the specialist skills. But when that AI can't deliver, you need the specialist skills in order to work it out. So resource management has become quite a hot topic. But in enabling that, you went back. I'm going to go back on something you said. You mentioned judgment. So you talk a lot about judgment becoming a scarce resource. And this is something I find quite interesting because I also do agree with that, that a lot of the time it's more like, well, if AI tells you to do it, you should do it, rather than having self proclaimed judgment. Yeah, really. I see it a lot with not even in my own world, but just in terms of like listening to friends, colleagues, even family members saying, like, we rely heavily on AI to answer simple questions. So yeah, I would like you to expand what you mean on
Well,
that.
look, just because AI tells you to do it doesn't mean you should do it. And look, the old adage, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. The same as just because AI comes up with the answer doesn't mean it's true either. And I think, look, our organizations are evolving, because if we went back in time, the real knowledge was at the top of the organization. People with years and years of experience, all the scars on their back. They made all the mistakes. They knew what
Hmm.
worked. They knew what didn't work. They knew the fixes and the workarounds, all that sort of stuff. But knowledge is no longer the problem, because I could join an organization tomorrow that I know absolutely nothing about. And if they have AI deployed within the business, I'm as knowledgeable as the next person. Um, But that doesn't mean I have judgment. That doesn't mean that I know which questions matter. It doesn't mean that I know if the data is incomplete. Um, and I think one of the questions that we need to think about is, look, you know, how, if we're going to take outputs from AI, which we should, of course we should, right? But how are we going to make sure that it's in context, that we have recognized the
Mhm.
trade-offs, that we understand the consequences of our decisions, and that we're able to interpret the outputs? Because I think what we need to do is we need to sort of look at something and sort of say, you know what, that's interesting, but there's something not right about what it's saying. My experience, my gut is telling me something different, and to be able to go and interrogate that and ground it and sort of say, well, actually, yeah, it was 70% right, but there's this thing that it didn't understand the nuance. And I have the judgment. My experience and judgment tells me that there's something else going on here that, the maths won't pick up. So we need to have judgment, and we need to be able to interpret the outputs, and we need to make sure that we are taking responsibility for the decisions, because ultimately we are accountable.
Mhm.
And you know judgment leads to decisions, which leads to accountability. So without judgment, right, well, who's going to make the decision? Was it made by a person? Was it made by a machine? A combination of both? If it was, well, who was responsible? Because ultimately we need to be accountable for the decisions of our organization. So AI, brilliant, and we should absolutely use it. I'm a huge fan, but we need to use it in the right way. It's not a case of, look, if you take the simple analogy that, well, AI has the answers, well, then we don't need people. You just have the AI
Mhm.
deal with the business, and the rest of us can go to the beach or whatever. But that's not the real world.
No, this is true. Actually, from my perspective on that, just to kind of elaborate on it, I think one of the biggest things about AI is great for knowledge sharing or pointing you in the right direction. The one thing AI that I feel it can do, and will be years before it will be able to do it, if ever, is to read the room, right? That expression that we always say, to read your audience. You need a certain human touch to be able to do that and to judge, because it's one thing to judge responsibilities. It's also another thing to judge the emotional feedback or the feedback from people's faces, etc. You can tell if someone says, for example, in English, we all know it. Oh, that's interesting. That has a double meaning in English if you're getting feedback, right? Interesting isn't always the greatest thing to be told. So I just think that from that side, it also falls into that. But I get the point. So it's
No, I
quite
know, no,
interesting.
and you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's just interesting. Yeah. But I guess on that note, going forward, then I guess one of the other things is like, how should organizations prepare young professionals when AI is doing so much already? Like, how do you actually train them?
I think we need to rethink the whole concept of apprenticeship. And traditionally that was sort of seen as in the trade. So you want to be a plumber, a carpenter, or whatever it might be. And I think in the world of AI, we need to rethink, well, how are we going to build our future leaders? Because it's not just about the work for today. So, like, I was working with a UK bank, and this came to light very much in the meeting, where they're saying, well, actually, if we think about our manager population, in the branches, they've been through all of the war stories. They understand the issues, they understand the customers, and that makes them great managers. But in the future, if all of the routine work is done by AI, where are the managers going to come from? Because they're not going to be the ones who have the learning. They're not going to be the ones who
This
got
is
things
true.
wrong or got challenged by a customer or whatever, because all that was done for them. So I think we need to rethink apprenticeship, and we need to be very deliberate in terms of how we're going to train people in the future. And that means we should be thinking about, when we bring people into an organization, MIT, for example, they're doing something very interesting with students. So what they're saying to them is, look, they know in the real world people are going to use AI. So what they're saying to them apparently is, look, use AI to critique Freud's theory of whatever, and then critically assess
Mhm.
that for its shortcomings. Right? So what they're doing is they're acknowledging that people are going to use AI, but they're also saying to them, yeah, but AI isn't the real answer. It is an answer, but you need to now apply your critical thinking and find the shortcomings and the hidden assumptions, or the things that AI does not understand, or the nuances that you were talking about. So I think what we're going to have to do in our work situation is, look, you know, let's say you have a creative person on the team and they come up with this wonderful campaign in 10 minutes. Okay, but that might be great. But I think we're going to have to move into the space of, okay, well, walk me through it. Walk me through your assumptions. Tell me the thinking that is going on behind all this, which is driving these, points of decision. Because it's the same with exams. Like do we move to a situation where all exams are in the room with a pen again for people, or do we actually move to a situation where we're saying to people, okay, now defend what you've written? So we can't just move into a world where AI is churning everything. We know it's been churned by AI, and we're kind of accepting it because it's convenient. That doesn't teach anyone anything. And so, look, I teach martial arts. I'm a fifth dan black belt in Japanese jiu-jitsu. I could give you a book on
Whoa. Okay.
jiu-jitsu, and you could read the book, or you could look at YouTube. That will not make you any way proficient in Japanese jiu-jitsu, because it takes years. It takes lots of mistakes. It takes lots of repeat of trying to do things and eventually cracking the nut where now I have it. So the same with work. We
Hmm.
cannot have a situation where we're bringing people into an organization. We're not going to invest in developing their capabilities, and we're just going to say, well, there's an AI, use that to come up with the answers. Because back to my earlier point, if that's the case, we don't need people. But we do need people because the world doesn't operate that simple. Understanding the rules and knowing how to apply them fairly and ethically and in a responsible way, and to be able to take ownership for your decisions, they are things that we need humans to do. Equally, we need humans, because we understand relationships. Back to your point, read the room. Well, we understand relationships. We understand the history of relationships. We understand context. Because if it's not written down, AI will assume that's the world, but that's not the world. We know the world is bigger than that, right? So we need
Hmm.
humans. Unless we're going to develop their capabilities, right, we have a problem. So this is really, really important. And I'm not sure that organizations are putting enough time into this.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because this is kind of going into my next questions. But for us, we work a lot in the manufacturing and pharmaceutical space, right? With a lot of different projects, multi projects, resources. You're talking thousands of people at
Mhm.
times. And one of the things that a lot of people ask, and I want to hear your answer on this, is the distinguished difference between AI adoption and AI advantage. This is like a hot topic that we hear quite often. And it's just interesting because I know you talk about this on previous podcasts, I think, and like interviews that you had. So I
Mm.
really want to deep dive into this with you and get your opinion on it.
Well, look, I would say, look, adoption is look access. Advantage is about becoming a better organization because of AI. And it's a bit like, look, let's say your organization decided, well, look, employee well-being is brilliant. So what we're going to do is we're going to give everyone gym membership. That doesn't change anything. Everyone might be a member of the gym, but that doesn't mean they're going to go to the gym and they're going to get a program and they're going to work on, how to lift weights or use machines or whatever to be, physically stronger or whatever it might be. And the same is true with AI. Just because we deploy AI or we have licenses or we have co-pilots or pilots or whatever it might be, that doesn't mean we have changed our ability to learn. It doesn't mean we have changed our decision making. It doesn't mean that we are executing better or that we have redesigned our work or our decision rights, our governance, our authority. So there's a huge difference. Just because we get 1,000 licenses, well, okay, that's an interesting statistic, but does it change anything? The real measure has to be around is it actually embedded into our operating model? Have we absorbed it into the way we think about the business? Is it actually helping us to improve decision making? And is the organization
Hmm.
better as a result?
Well, you'd hope so, but but again, this is the perfect opportunity. We have a very well aligned questions because at Alex, a lot of the time we're spending a lot of time on how organizations make better decisions. This is going into the decision making factor of AI, right? What's your opinion on is AI improving decision making throughout an organization, or is it causing more frustration?
Well, it can do both. And if you want to have faster decisions, they're not necessarily always better decisions.
Hmm.
I did
That's
work
true.
in financial services at one stage, and the adage was, if you want a fast decision, it will be no, because you're not giving people time to exercise judgment. And I think, look, AI on one level is brilliant because It can look at complex documents. It can look for patterns. It can identify risks. It can compare one document to another. It can come up with challenges, assumptions, all those sort of things, and that's brilliant. But on the other level, if it just becomes decision theater where we have loads of glowing reports and this, that, and the other, but it actually doesn't change anything in the organization. They used to joke about, the consultant's report with the TUD factor. The heavier the report, the more important it must be and the more you must pay for it. Well, the same is true here. What we really need is to make sure that we're making better decisions, not just faster decisions. And that means we need to,
Mm-hmm.
embed, AI into the decision-making process. We need to embed it into how the organization really works. Because look, on paper, a lot of firms think this is their operating model, right? And in reality, that's not their operating model at all, because there's loads of workarounds going on because people in the business know where all the problems are. So they never get fixed, but they work around them. And then you deploy AI on top of that, and now it's driving faster decisions, but it doesn't understand the workarounds and all the nuances and everything else that's going on. So it might be driving faster decisions that are irrelevant from a customer point of view or from an outcomes point of view. So I think it can do both, but you need to back to, well, what are we actually trying to do here? And look, it's a really important question that I often ask firms in terms of well, what are you actually trying to do here? Because look, we don't do transformation, we don't do AI because everyone else does AI. Um, we
Mm-hmm.
will do something with AI because it's going to help us come up with better outcomes, right? In a more, in a way that's faster, more efficient, all those type of things. But we're not doing AI for the sake of AI, right? So it comes back, what are we actually trying to do? And then if we understand, you know, why we're trying to do something with the business and we understand how we can get there, well, then we can answer questions around what purpose does AI serve in that. But I think one of our risks at the moment is we just run out and get lots of AI and deploy them into an organization that we think works in one way and it actually works in a different way. And then we're looking at all these pilots and we're wondering, well, why hasn't this produced the results we set out to get?
Yep. I think we see this across the board, and especially with like tech stacks. Tech stacks are growing and growing and growing, and yet is it driving the results that you want? Who knows at this point?
Mm.
But in general, it's a good source of information, right? Let's be real. One thing we see repeatedly is that technology is rarely the hardest part, right? It's the changing how people actually really work on their day to day. Um, does that match, or do you see it being an issue in general on teams?
Yeah,
So,
look,
so pretty much what I'm trying to say is they're changing their workload. Yeah.
look, all of these things are socio-technical. So it's never just about the technology. As human beings, we're not great with change. We don't like change. We're creatures of habit. And when new technologies
Hmm.
come along, we tend to resist them a little bit, and then we start using them, and then we start discovering actually it could be very good if we do this with it, and we experiment and we bring it somewhere different, and then over a period of time it becomes second nature, and we stop even thinking about it. So when we think about AI, what are people reading? They're reading in the newspapers, well, AI is coming for your job. They hear the town hall meeting about, well, AI is going to be great. It's going to revolutionize the business. And they go home and they think, is this shorthand for downsizing, right sizing? Will I have a job? What actually will happen to me? What happens to my department and my colleagues, etc.? So I think, look, there's lots of organizational challenges around any technology. Doesn't matter what it is, right? Because
Hmm.
we grew up in a particular way, and then suddenly there's something comes along, and it's sort of saying, well, we need to do something different. Now, AI is different in that heretofore a lot of our technologies in the main have been passive. Well, you start introducing things like agentic AI. Now you have stuff that's not passive, that actually interprets and makes decisions by itself, and that starts to really muddy the water. So I think AI is absolutely impressive. I think it is brilliant for organizations, but we need to be clear then in terms of, well, who owns what? Who owns the outputs? Who is accountable when it goes wrong? What should be automated? What should stay within the realms of human decision making? Which processes should be redesigned? Which should be got rid of altogether? Because look, one of the things we definitely don't want to do is to start using AI to make processes we shouldn't be doing even better, right? Because that doesn't make
Hmm.
sense. Because if our operating model or if our processes are broken and all we do is put more AI on top of it, well, that doesn't really achieve anything except make us more effective of something we're not really good at doing, or something that's not required. So I think the issue here is, when we think about digital transformation, the problem I always think is the word digital. We should talk about transformation. If we think about transformation, we're thinking about people, and this is about involving people and making them part of the transformation and helping them to come up with, well, yeah, AI can help us to do these things. And that means you need to be clear on the direction of travel in terms of where the organization needs to get to. You need to be clear in terms of how we will get there and what that means for stakeholders, including employees. So, in 3 years' time, our organization will look different. How we will get there, we're going to do all these things. And in that, we're also going to improve your skills. So you will have a whole new set of skills that you don't have today, you will have in 3 years' time. And even if I don't want to stay, I'm much more skilled and I can go somewhere else. But if you just overlay technology into an organization and sort of say, there you go, we've given you the tools, it's not going to happen, because it's about people. And if people don't embrace the technology and they don't embrace the change, well, then you just have another technology sitting in the stack, which people are bypassing and doing other things. So you really need to focus on how we're going to bring the organization on a journey, and what that means for all the stakeholders, what it means for the employees, how we're going to upskill our employees so they are part of the solution as opposed to this being imposed onto them. And doing that makes loads of sense because they're the ones who know where all the problems are. They know where the operating model doesn't work properly or where the processes are broken. And if you're doing this right, they can say, well, actually, we should fix this process, or actually, we should eliminate that process and do this instead because this is what customers really need. Now, let's look at how we put that on
Hmm.
steroids with AI. Now, wouldn't that be a much better outcome as opposed to, well, back to your earlier question, well, we got loads of licenses, so our adoption has gone through the roof, but we're not getting any results because actually people haven't embraced it.
Yeah, sometimes less is more, and sweeping things under the rug always ends up having larger issues down the road, right? Which is
Yeah.
something we see quite often, right? So, in general speaking, I totally agree with you. I guess this kind of leads into the next question. You see a lot of companies in today's society, but in particularly within like traditional industries and more reliable, from manufacturing to banks, etc., where now AI is becoming part of the company policy.
Mm.
So where does responsibility lie from terms of say humans versus AI in terms of what the employee output should be, KPIs, for example, targets, goals, production levels?
Yeah.
Like, should this be a statistic from AI, or do you have to take in the human factor kind of thing, I guess?
No, look, ultimately, we need to fundamentally rethink this. And look, there are things that humans are uniquely skilled at. And if you look at the World Economic Forum, they talk about, the jobs of 2030. you know, a lot of the skills required are not technical skills. They're, complex problem solving, critical thinking, relationships, all these type of things. And I think when we put this in the context of an organization, well, look, you know, AI will optimize whatever you tell it to optimize, but it doesn't necessarily understand the purpose of the organization, its values, how it actually does its business, its relationship with its various stakeholders, or even the consequences of well, it could do that, but yeah, but if you do that, what are the unintended consequences? It doesn't necessarily work on that basis. And look, in every organization, you know we have rules, which is great, right? Because we need rules to have some sort of so to avoid chaos. But having said that, we don't work in a perfect world. There's always ambiguity. There's always edge cases. There's always competing priorities. There's always trade-offs, right? So yeah, and if you think of any organization, well, we could do 10 things, but we actually, in reality, we can only do two. So which two do we do? So there's lots of things where we need humans to actually, take the decisions. And back to your earlier point,
Hmm.
exercise judgment. Well, which is more important? Right? Do we do A or do we do B? And if we do A, what criteria are we using to drive A to execute in a way that is responsible and drives good outcomes. So I think, look, you know, it's not about it's not about having AI just apply the rules. It's around AI supporting and augmenting our people so they know what rules apply, but they're exercising judgment to make sure that we're optimizing in terms of the right outcomes for the organization and its customers.
Yeah, 100%. I guess, look, as an AI, I'm an AI supporter, right? I'm an AI advocate almost, shall we say? But in theory, I completely agree with you. You also have the human element. I don't think AI is a substitute for everything, but I do think it has its place. But one of the things that I would ask, and that I ask a lot of our guests, is what's one AI thing or a theme you see that AI still does badly or that has a negative impact?
So look, AI is absolutely brilliant. Um, you can give a question, and it can work inside a body of knowledge, and it will optimize the answers for you. But what AI doesn't do is say, yeah, but William, that's not the real question. Um, so AI doesn't say, yeah, that is interesting. However, isn't this a much more important question that we need to deal with? So AI is not going to turn around and say, yeah, well, William, here's how we're going to optimize that process you're talking about. And here's how we can make it 20 times faster, etc. It doesn't say, yeah, but William, why are we doing this process at all? Because our customers don't seem to need this. So I think AI is brilliant in its own environment. However, right, we need to make sure that it doesn't lead us into fool's gold. The crock of gold at the end of the rainbow, as we would say in Ireland, because are we optimizing the
Yep.
right things, right? Are we automating the right things? Are we doing things to the right processes? Instead, we need to be using AI as an opportunity to rethink the business, rethink our operating model, rethink our processes, rethink what are the outcomes that we are trying to deliver here, because AI is not going to do that. It can certainly assist you, right? But it's not going to prompt you to sort of say, yeah, William, I think this is a more important question. So we need to be careful that, if we, and this comes back to judgment as well, like if all we do is ask AI questions within a certain, narrow domain, we will optimize the answers for that, but we might be missing the whole equation.
Mhm.
So AI, brilliant. However, we need to make sure that we're asking the right questions. And in my experience, it's never really about the answers, it's about the questions. And I always use the phrase, breakthroughs are made with questions, not answers. So, if
Yep.
we're using AI to help us ask really challenging questions, um, that is far better than if we're just using AI and it's nearly like rote. So learning your maths table at school, 2 by 2 is 4, right? That's not learning. And back to your earlier conversation in terms of the apprentice, how are we teaching people so that it is something that augments them, but it enables them to challenge and to improve the organization and to improve decision making and improve outcomes. Otherwise, you just run the risk of that. Well, look, everyone's doing the same thing, and they're all operating within a very narrow set of questions within a very narrow domain, and we get a lot of blah. What we want is our organization to succeed, and we need to challenge, and we need to use AI as part of the challenge, but not the challenge in its own right.
Yeah, I guess I completely agree with you because from my perspective, it's kind of like forecasting, right? For the AI can do the forecasting, but you have to have the basic knowledge for it to forecast. It's kind of similar with what our customers use when it comes to our simulation mode. They utilize this for forecasting, but they also have to have the basics of how their projects are working in order to be able to enable it. So,
Yeah, yeah,
same
yeah, yeah, of
concept.
course.
Um, exactly. But in general, I guess one of the things that I always ask also is like, is it dangerous for companies to stop using AI or move too slowly with AI? Because right now, AI is driving acceleration in all industries, right? We have to be completely honest about it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I do agree it can have a negative impact, but if it's too slow, you're going to fall behind. But do you agree with that, or would you be on the opposite side of the fence?
Well, look, I think the risk is not speed. I think the risk is not learning. So I think, look, it's a double-edged sword. You go too slow, you get left behind because your competitors are all going to do it. Right? You really create internal problems because your employees are going to do it anyway. So then you end up in a situation where perhaps you have a big shadow IT issue. So going too slow is not the answer. Going too fast equally has challenges because you might confuse progress with activity. You might also move into a scenario where actually decisions are happening in the organization and you don't understand the basis for them. So your governance and everything else hasn't caught up. So I think it's about being intentional. It's about being it has to be organization specific. Every organization knows their capability and where they're at, and I think you need to have an intentional plan in terms of how you're going to move the organization forward with AI at a speed that you can keep your governance in place that also allows you to improve decision making. So it's not about being first, because you might be first and end up in court and have your reputation trashed and everything else. It's not about being last because you might go out of business. It's about trying to find that right balance, that you're moving at a speed where you're not going to lose control of the organization, but you are improving the organization and its ability to make better decisions to drive better outcomes.
Very good. Um, what is one thing leaders should do now to ensure AI makes people more capable and more than dependent? So, what do you think? Because this is going back to the beginning, but I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
curious
yeah,
as to
yeah.
how you would merge those two together.
So I think we need to stop thinking about AI as a tool that we're rolling out, and think about AI as an opportunity to redesign work. And that means we need to
Okay.
understand what should we do now. We must understand, well, what do we want humans to learn. What do we want them to be accountable for and make the decisions on. And then how does all of this help the organization become better. So I think, look, and I've seen this for over 2 decades. We've talked about digital disruption for the last 2, 3 decades, and what happens? Organizations, they need to have the latest tool. Oh, we need a blockchain. Well, we need an AI. Oh, we need whatever it is. Right? And really, we may or we may not. That's not really the issue. The issue is, what is the organization actually trying to do? And where is the organization trying to be in the future, and how can it get there? And in that context, how does the technology support that? And I think within the discussion of AI, what we need to be sort of saying is, actually, we can do things now that we never thought possible, but that's not why we're going to do them. We need to be clear in terms of what are those things that we really want to do, and then understand, how we can get there with AI as a tool that will support us to get there, right? But if we just start with the AI, well, what have we got? We've just got another technology overlay, and that will not work. So I would say, look, stop thinking about tools, start thinking about redesign of work, redesign of the future of work, what it means for our people, what we expect of our people, how we're going to support our people, how we're going to augment them, how we're going to reskill them or upskill them, whatever the phrase might be, and then how we're going to get everyone on the same page. Because just getting new tools, well, great, but there's a backline to the gym membership. Just because I got a gym membership doesn't mean I'm going to be fitter or lose weight or do any of those things I might like to do.
That's the dream. To pay for the gym membership and have the AI do it for you would be the
Yeah.
dream. But in general, I guess one of the things, like, we're coming towards the end of my questions now before we move to like the questions and answers, etc., and the social
Hmm.
questions. But I always ask, if you were to fast forward to 2035 or 2045, what is something you think we'll look back on in today's world about AI that we'll all be laughing at and think how ridiculous we were or how incredible it was, etc.
Well, look, I mean,
Is there something you think?
no, I mean, look, the first thing is that, look, AI has been around for longer than me, and I'm older than you, William. Right? So AI has been around for
You
many,
sure?
many decades. And, we've all been using AI for the last couple of decades. We just don't think about using AI for the last. So when you go into your Google Maps or Google Translate or your Netflix or Amazon or any of these, things, that's all AI, right? Spotify, AI, right? Spotify picks better music for me than I can pick for myself at this stage, right? But that's all AI. So we've been using AI for decades. We just didn't think about it. When suddenly ChatGTP came along, all of a sudden the world is talking about AI. So generative AI then took over the world, and now agentic AI. So I think, look, we shouldn't be afraid of AI. It's a natural evolution. But what we need to think about is, what does that mean for us personally? What does it mean for our organizations and for our people? So, look, the calculator didn't get rid of the accountant, neither did the Excel spreadsheet, but it meant that the accountant could add value in a much better way. And we need to be thinking about AI in a similar vein in terms of, well, if AI allows me to do things quicker because it removes a lot of the mundane, how then am I going to use that time? It won't be by the water cooler, unless, that's what I'm into, right? But how is that going to allow me to develop my skills and advance in my career? And I think when we look back, we'll see that actually this was a lot of noise. And what we probably didn't realize at the outset was actually this wasn't about the technology. It rarely is. This is about us rethinking the business. And it's only when all of these pilots, and look, the stats on all the pilots are not wonderful, but all of these pilots are going on. But what's the problem? Well, they're not about enterprise transformation. They're about pilots. And in their own right, they're very interesting. But I think what we'll look back and sort of say is actually, had we realized what we had, we would have early in the conversation engaged on how we're going to transform the enterprise and use AI as a tool to support that transformation.
Perfect answer. Nicely done. I like it. Hopefully 2035 will be better than we expect. And then maybe I'll be able to go and pay AI to do my gym membership. But in general, we are going to open up the questions and answers field now. I'm sorry, yeah. If you can figure out AI that will do the gym, I would be super happy.
It'll give you an interesting statistics, but it won't help you.
Yeah,
And that's the problem with same
but
problem with work, right? So you have a brilliant scorecard, but it won't be you. So
so
instead of
you think AI is in.
your muscles and stamina and everything else, you know, AI is doing wonderful things. And the same with our brain. Look, the risk we have here is that we outsource the cognitive elements of our thinking, and we don't want to do that. It's back to judgment and developing capability. But sorry, yeah, you were
Yeah.
about to ask some questions from the chat.
No, yeah, but my thing was we're just so it's kind of like enabling laziness in another way, is what you're saying. But yeah, if we're being plain English, as we say. But in general, one of the questions that we got asked online is, you work a lot with C-suites. If you were to give every C-suite that you know one piece of AI advice or one piece of advice with adopting AI, what would it be?
Well, look, I love this question that I ask many C-suites and boards and execs teams is, if you were starting again today, would you start from here? And invariably, the answer is no, right? So, C-suite know the issues a lot of the time. Sometimes they can be a bit detached from the reality of the organization.
Yeah.
But I think what I was sort of saying to the C-suite is, look, you have this wonderful opportunity to rethink the organization, to rethink work, to rethink skills, and you need to put the effort in up front, because getting there by iteration is not transformation. That's change management. And there's a huge difference between change management and transformation. Change management is about fixing the past, right? So we made it better, smarter, faster, cheaper, whatever it might be. Transformation is about, well, should we have a vision for the future? And okay, we understand the past, but it's not rooted in the past, it's rooted in the future. And we're going to use the transformation journey to bring in AI as part of how we're going to get there. And I think the opportunity for
Hmm.
organizations, particularly C-suite, look, and look, the problem, and look, I sometimes joke about the C-suite being able to spell AI, but the real issue what I'm getting at here is that, look, most execs and board members, they don't consider themselves technologists. So when they hear a technology discussion, it immediately can feel uncomfortable for a lot of people. And what we need to bring it back to is, actually, it's not about the technology. It's about the business. It's about the business model. It's about the people skills, about the ability to deliver. And that's a conversation everyone can relate to and engage on. So I would say, look, forget about it as a technology and think about it as an opportunity to transform.
Yeah, nicely done. We're going to head to the Q&A now, so I'm just going to check the questions really quickly. When it comes to error in judgment with AI, who takes responsibility? Is it the management, the employee, or can you blame AI? So this is going back to your judgment
Well, look,
question.
First, you can't blame AI. Notwithstanding, I do foresee court cases where organizations are trying to say they didn't realize the AI did that. I think the issue is it starts to become a little bit opaque in terms of who made the decision, and if, for example, an organization is using AI, who actually made the decision here? Was it the C suite? Was it AI, or was it a combination of both? Was it multiple parties? Was it the the management, the developers, the whatever? And then the question is, well, yeah, but who actually made this decision? So I think we need to be clear in terms of decision authority in this new world, because it becomes very opaque very quickly. And even if I made the decision, but actually I didn't really make the decision, because all I did was took the outcome of AI and used that, right? It starts to become very grey, particularly if I can say, well, actually, there was five other people were involved. So we need to be clear in terms of decision authority and accountability in the organization going forward, and that means AI is a tool; it is not the answer.
Very good. Yeah, perfect answer. And we have another question coming in now from Javier, I believe. AI feels like a shortcut to experience, but isn't the struggle of learning that makes that experience actually stick?
Yeah, and that is
So
a
I think
great
you might.
question, Javier, because look, we learn through friction, um, and we learn by like we were talking earlier. We go in, we write the report. Someone says, "Look, William, that was it's a good attempt, but look, you missed a whole bunch of things here and whatnot." So we learn through all that friction, and the risk is that we use AI to automate away all that friction. But in automating all the friction, we actually reduce our capability for learning. So now we don't have that friction, because AI produced a beautiful, beautiful report within 10 minutes. Um, but what did I learn? I learned when I'm called aside by my team leader or manager or whatever it is, and they say, "Yeah, look, Tony, there's a few things going on here. I like this piece here, but you've totally missed the ball in this area here. And by the way, look, we have policies that relate to this that should be brought in, and so on and so forth." I won't make those mistakes again, right? Because I've learned from them. Um, and the risk is we remove all that friction. So it's a great point, Javier, and I've written about this quite a bit in terms of, if you remove the friction, you remove the ability to learn. And if you remove the ability to learn, well, then why do we need people at all? Because we're not actually doing anything except taking the outputs of AI, and AI has already made its mind up.
Yeah, very good, very good. I guess we have one more question and then we'll see what else comes in. But we're so focused on the fear of jobs disappearing that we miss the opportunity to redefine roles. It's
Mm.
not about adopting, it's about creating new adventures or collaborations with AI. Agree or disagree?
No, no, I agree. I think. Look. AI is wonderful, and I think one of the things that we recognize at a very early stage is that unlike the metaverse, which needed physical hardware, AI, all you needed was access to the internet. So you know everyone is using AI in some shape or form. It's on every smartphone nowadays as well, right? So what we need to do is we need to harness that enthusiasm and sort of say to people, look, let's talk about your career plan. Let's talk about your learning needs. And let's talk about, how we're going to use AI to augment you and to actually improve your skills. So it's one thing to be able to use ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever. It's another thing to be able to sort of say, well, look, we're going to actually help you to do things that, ordinarily speaking, would take you a week. You'll be able to do them in a day. But within this context, we're also going to teach you how to challenge them, and how to refine the outputs, and how to make sure that they are fact checked and they're right and correct, and that we don't end up in any problems. So I think the opportunity is there, and I think we should embrace it. Personally, I said at the outset, it's a two-way street. We need to be proactive ourselves, and then our organization also needs to be proactive. And look, it's in the interest of both, because if I don't improve my skills, well, I become irrelevant. And if the organization doesn't want to improve my skills, well, the skill set of the organization becomes redundant. So Our interests are totally aligned here. The question is, there needs to be a willingness on both sides to make it happen.
For those on the operational level, right? So I
Mm.
guess this is not middle management or seniors, this is operational level. Is there a chance to escape the AI trap of unemployment if you're on an operational level and are not strategic? Or so pretty much what they're saying is the functional person on the team.
Yeah, I mean, look,
Because,
everyone has skills, and everyone has unique skills and talents. I would say, look, AI will replace certain work for sure, but just like the last 2 decades have shown us, it will also create a whole range of new jobs. And one of the things that we need to be thinking about is that, look, we're going to need people who understand the processes, that understand the operations, who understand, right, who can look at something and question it and critique it and sort of say, no, I'm not happy with that, right? Because the further up the organization you go, the less understanding there can be of these things. So of course there are opportunities, but we need to be thinking about, look, it's not about protecting what I do today if it can be automated. If it can be automated, I need to be thinking about, okay, so what am I going to do to improve my skills so that I am still relevant, right? Or, as I heard some talking about was, okay, my skills have been automated in this industry, or that industry doesn't need it anymore. What industry does need it? And how do I embellish my skills to make sure that I'm ready for that? So I think, look, you know, every person, I mean, the World Economic Forum says one in two of us needs to be retrained. So that's either you or me. No, it's both of us in reality, right?
mm,
So every one of us needs to treat every day as a learning day, and we need to be thinking about, don't wait on your organization to come up with a plan. You need to be coming up with a plan for yourself, because the organization can do so much, but ultimately it's our skill set. And if we really want to be proficient in terms of understanding AI, its uses, its shortcomings, where it can actually augment and support, where it actually introduces risk, a lot of that learning is down to us personally. And I would say, look, every single day should be an opportunity. So whether it's reading reports, reading articles, doing online courses, whatever it might be, but improve your skill set. And don't wait. Right? Don't wait for someone to come along and say, well, your skills are redundant. Yeah, it's not about the skills. It's about the work you're doing might be redundant, but your skills can be used to oversee that work. So I'd say invest in yourself today and have the conversation with your employer in terms of, I want to work with you to improve my skill set so that I can contribute in an optimal way to this organization in the future.
we have another question coming in here. What will the impact of AI on management role now that AI is so good at cognitive tasks?
Well, yeah, it is and it isn't. I think AI is good in a certain, as I say, in a certain box, right? So it can understand things, it can look at strategy, it can question the assumptions, it can do a whole range of things. But I think what we need is that managers need to sit above it. And managers need to engage in this, by the way, because look, what happens in organizations is you hear about the frozen middle. So the board and the exec have made some big pronouncements about transformation, and then everyone down in the front end of the organization, they're wondering what this is all about, and they talk to the people in the middle, and they kind of, well, don't worry about that. That's not for here or whatever. They need to engage in it, and they need to understand that actually their role moves more from management to orchestration. And I think we really need to get our mind clear on this. That, look, our way of thinking about organizations is that, as the manager, I must have more information or more knowledge or more understanding. And that's not necessarily the case, because in the future, we may have teams of people who are not only young, enthusiastic, and very bright, but some of those people or some of those team members may be AI. So, collectively, they might be challenging me as a manager. And my role is not to be defensive. My role is actually to use my skills and expertise and judgment to look at what they're sort of saying and saying, actually, that's very interesting. Or that is really good. However, if we did this, it would be even better. Right. So we need to learn to, let go the reins a little bit and recognize that, Teams will be augmented, teams will be smarter, and our role is around getting the best out of our teams, not about being the person who has all the answers in the first place. Because to me, that world is gone. We're not in that world anymore.
So the know-it-all is gone, has left the building. No, I'm kidding.
It is, yeah. Because
Uh,
look, and look, the reality is, look, we can't be expected to know everything. And if you think, so I did a talk for high potential graduates there about 2 years ago, and I was asked to talk to them about, digital. And I'm thinking, oh, it's digital natives. What am I going to talk to these guys about? Sure, they're all 23 and 4. They'd run rings around me. I did a talk on AI and the immersive economy. So mixing up AI, the metaverse, all that sort of stuff. And afterwards, they were asked a simple question by the guy running the program. He said to them, "How much of this did you cover on your degree programs?" So, accountants, engineers, lawyers, you name it, whatever they were. Well,
mhm.
zero. So if you think about it, we are being asked as people to make decisions augmented by technologies that we have never been trained or educated on. Um, And
Crazy.
isn't that a fundamental flaw in how we think about our organizations? Because surely we should be sort of saying, well, look, we need to be, AI or digital fluent or whatever it might be. But then we need to create the environment where people can learn, they can practice, they can sandbox, they can, propose and test and experiment. And we need to create the psychological safety for that. So it's not a free for all. It's bounded in terms of what you can do and in what basis you can do it. But we need to be creating that environment where people are learning. And back to your earlier question, we're actually thinking about, whoa, look at all these things we could do. And look, I know this lady in America, she's a transformation expert, and she goes into firms, and first thing she wants to do is talk to the recent hires. And it doesn't matter if they're only there a week, it's just them. So, what do you think of the organization? What would you do different? And just listens to them in terms of, because they're digital natives and they're kind of looking at why we're doing all these quaint things when technology could do so much more. So I think the opportunity is there, and I think we need to think seriously about getting this right.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is about learning and about knowing, right? These are the two things. You say you work a lot with the US. Um, so do you think adoption of AI is faster in the US or in Europe, or do you think there are different modems, different ways of doing it?
No, look, I think every organization in the world, every person in the world is thinking about AI. I think adoption is not the issue, as we've said earlier. I think the proof of the pudding will be which organizations emerge better with better decision making capability, driving better outcomes. And I think what we've had heretofore is just a lot of interesting pilots and co-pilots and experiments. I think we haven't seen enough in any jurisdiction in terms of sustained transformation, where AI is embedded into the operating model, where it's embedded into the learning model, where it's actually enhancing and driving better decisions and outcomes. So I think we're at an early juncture. I think, look, everyone's looking at it, everyone's thinking about it, but that's not the same. That's like having the gym membership. That's not the same as going up to the gym. So we need to start going to the gym, and the gym is a mental cognitive gym where we're helping our organization using AI to make better decisions and better outcomes.